Nobody expected her to say anything. That was, in many ways, the whole point. For 19 years, Maria Francisca Perelló Mary, to everyone who knew her, had stood at the outermost edge of the most dazzling career in tennis, steadfast and deliberate and almost invisible by design. She gave no interviews. She made no grand statements. She let her husband's achievements carry the room, and she got on with the quiet, serious work of running his foundation. So, when she finally broke that silence without warning, without fanfare, for a 19-year-old wildcard from the Philippines, the tennis world didn't quite know what to do with itself. To understand why her words landed the way they did, you have to go back further. Not to Miami, not even to a tennis court. You have to go to a red clay island in Spain and to a little girl who left everything she knew. Alex Eala was born on the 23rd of May, 2005, in Quezon City, Philippines. Her mother, Rosemary, had competed for the Philippines in swimming at the Southeast Asian Games. Sport ran in the blood. But it was tennis that chose Alex. And it was one institution specifically that would decide what kind of player she'd become. She was 12 years old when she and her brother Michael boarded a flight to Manacor, Mallorca. Think carefully about what that actually means. A 12-year-old girl, leaving the heat and the noise of Quezon City, landing in a small Spanish town she'd never seen, to chase a future that most people around her probably couldn't fully picture yet. She didn't speak the language. She didn't know the culture. She only knew she loved this sport, and that this place, Rafa's place, built in the image of Rafa's values, was where champions were made. For 6 years, she trained on those courts. She studied in those classrooms. She grew up inside that philosophy of relentless work, physical discipline, and stubborn mental strength, the same values that had made Nadal one of the greatest athletes the sport had ever produced. At 14, she won the Australian Open junior doubles title. The following year, she repeated the feat at Roland Garros. These were not accidents. These were signals early, unmistakable signals that something extraordinary was being built inside this quiet, determined girl from the Philippines. And then in 2022, she announced herself properly. At the US Open, she became the first Filipino ever to win a junior Grand Slam singles title. The entire Philippines celebrated as if the country itself had won something. For Alex, it was only the beginning. She graduated from the academy in 2023 and stepped into the professional world. And then came the part of the story that doesn't make highlight reels: the qualifying losses, the early exits, the grinding, unglamorous fight just to stay relevant on a tour that doesn't wait for anyone. She ranked 143rd in the world going into 2025. Most people outside the Philippines and the Nadal Academy faithful hadn't seriously put their money on her yet. But here is what those who watched closely noticed. She never looked like someone who was going to quit. She always looked like someone who was simply waiting for her moment. Her moment arrived in Miami, March 2025. One of the most prestigious events on the WTA calendar. Thousands of fans, dozens of ranked professionals, and one wildcard entrant that almost nobody had penciled in as a threat. Her first win over American local Katie Volanets was clean and composed, but it didn't set off alarms. Then came Jelena Ostapenko, former French Open champion, one of the most dangerous ball strikers alive. Eala beat her 7-6, 7-5. People started paying attention. Then Madison Keys, reigning Australian Open champion, world number 5. Eala beat her 6-4, 6-2. Not a scrappy escape, not a stolen match. A dominant, composed, historic performance. The sort of scoreline that makes journalists stop mid-sentence and check if they've read it right. The tennis world stopped. Who is this girl? But the moment that truly shook the sport was still coming. Because in the quarterfinals, fate had arranged something almost cinematic. Across the net from Eala stood Iga Świątek, world number 2, 5-time Grand Slam champion, and a woman who had attended Alex's graduation ceremony at the Rafa Nadal Academy just 2 years earlier, invited personally by Rafa himself during an emotional event held in Manacor. In Miami, the two players met again on court. Eala won, 6-2, 7-5. The stadium erupted. The internet exploded. And somewhere in Mallorca, on an island where a retired champion was living quietly with his family, a phone lit up with notifications. Rafa messaged her. It was the first time he had ever done so personally. Funny story, Eala said in an interview later, smiling. I only saw it a couple of days after. It was exciting to see his notification. The man who had retired from professional tennis barely 5 months earlier was watching, and so was his wife. Mary Perelló is someone the tennis world has consistently underestimated. She attended the University of the Balearic Islands, earned a degree in business management, went on to study at ESAID in Barcelona, She joined the Rafa Nadal Foundation in 2012, rose through the ranks, and by November 2019 was its CEO, overseeing programs dedicated to helping children discover the transformative power of sport and education. She was not a bystander to the academy that shaped Alex Eala. She was one of its architects. She had been there at the fundraisers, the development plans, the long and costly work of building young athletes from nothing. She knew what it took. She knew what it cost. So when Alex's run in Miami began to trend globally, when this girl from Quezon City who had grown up on their courts began rewriting what was possible, Mary wasn't watching as a fan. She was watching as someone who understood, more intimately than almost anyone, what she was actually seeing. At Rafa's retirement ceremony, he had spoken about her directly. "My wife Mary, we've been together for 19 years. You've been the perfect partner throughout all of this. Coming home every day and seeing you and our son has given me the energy to keep going." That is who Mary is. Not just a wife. The anchor. The person who held the entire ecosystem of Rafa Nadal champion, human, family man together through all of it. And now, in retirement, in August 2025, she and Rafa had welcomed their second child together, a baby named Miguel, named after Mary's late father who had passed away in April 2023. Their life had moved into a new, quieter chapter. Private, peaceful, family first. So when she allowed herself, finally, to comment to break the particular silence she had kept throughout Rafa's entire career, the words she reportedly said caught even those closest to the family off guard. "I was not expecting this. Not this soon, not this big. She has become something truly special, and I could not be more proud." The tennis world went quiet for a moment. Then it erupted. Filipino fans who had already been celebrating their national hero's run for months treated the moment like a coronation. Social media flooded. Trending topics ignited. The story had become about something deeper than tennis, about the quiet, powerful validation that comes from the family of the man who built the very institution that shaped her. Because here is what people instinctively understood. It wasn't a congratulatory tweet from the Academy's marketing team. This was Mary, a woman who had lived through 19 years of Rafael Nadal's career without making many public statements at all. A woman who chose privacy over attention at almost every turn. When someone that measured, that deliberate, chooses to acknowledge you publicly, it means something different. It means she meant it. Inside the Philippines, the comparison being made was extraordinary. Writers and commentators began invoking Manny Pacquiao not as a sporting comparison, but as a cultural one. Pacquiao hadn't just won fights. He had given an entire nation a reason to feel seen on the world stage, a reason to believe that someone who looked like them and came from where they came from could stand at the very top. And now Alex Eala was doing the same thing, with a tennis racket, on clay and hardcourt, in stadiums that had never before held a Filipino story like hers. Meanwhile, Rafa himself had not let go of her story. After Miami, he had publicly congratulated her on social media. In December 2025, the two of them trained together on court. Rafa, 6 months into retirement, back on the surface he loved, alongside the young woman his academy had raised. He posted about it. She replied, "Thank you for today, Rafa." The girl who had arrived at his academy at 12 years old, who had grown up on his courts, who had carried his philosophy into every match she played, who had made history while he watched from home, she was now on the court with him again, not as a student this time, as a professional, as proof that the whole thing had worked. By the end of 2025, the numbers told the story plainly. She had started the year ranked 143rd. She finished it inside the top 50. She had beaten former Grand Slam champions, reached a WTA 1000 semifinal, made her first WTA 125 final at Eastbourne, and claimed her first WTA title in Guadalajara. At the US Open, she achieved the first main draw match victory by a Filipino player in a Grand Slam in the Open era. Into 2026, she climbed further still, a career high of 29th in the world, a semi-final in Auckland, quarter-finals in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, a round of 16 at Indian Wells. She described 2025 as the best year of my sporting life. She described training with Rafa as something people can only dream of. Think about the weight of that. The girl who crossed the world at 12. The girl who grew up in someone else's language and someone else's country, learning a philosophy that wasn't hers by birth but became hers by effort. The girl who went through all the quiet, unglamorous years of losing before the world was watching and kept going anyway. She was back on the court with the man who built that philosophy. Not as a student, but as his equal, and she called it a dream. Mary Perelló watched all of it unfold. She knew the layers of it in a way that nobody else could. She knew what the academy had invested. She knew the belief Rafa had placed in this young woman's future. And she knew what it felt like to watch someone carry a legacy forward because she had spent 19 years watching her husband do exactly that. So, when she said she was not expecting it, not this soon, not this big, it wasn't dismissal. It wasn't surprise at Eala's talent. It was something quieter and more profound than that. It was awe. The kind of genuine, undefended awe that only arrives when something exceeds every hopeful expectation you ever allowed yourself to hold. And that, more than any ranking or trophy or trending topic, is what made the tennis world stop and pay attention. Not the victory in Miami, not the match against Świątek, not even the first Filipino Grand Slam win in the Open era. It was the moment when the most private woman in tennis, the woman who had seen everything up close, for 2 decades looked at this girl from Quezon City and found herself without adequate words. That's how you know you've become something real.